Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the 2024 presidential election. I'll be giving you all an update on the polling data that we have. Yesterday, we had a poll from NBC News, and it showed that Kamala Harris leads by 5 points against Donald Trump nationally. She was at 49%, Donald Trump was at 44%. If we take a look at this poll from MSNBC, this is the first time this year that a Democrat has led. Obviously, they did 3 polls with Biden. They do it every couple of months. In January, Biden was down by 5. He was down by 2 in April, and then down by 2 in July. And what you'll see is that Donald Trump's vote share has gone down, incrementally every time they've done this poll. He was at 47 in January, which is very good considering it was early in January. He hadn't even won the primary officially yet. The fact that he was at 47% support was very good for him. He went down to 46%, which in April is still quite good, I'd say. Went down to 45% in July, and he's now at 44%. Democratic shares, though, they've mostly gone up. They went down between April and July, but they went up broadly. Biden was at 42, he went up to 44, went back down to 43. But what matters now for Democrats is that Kamala Harris is the nominee, and she's at 49, which is a good sign for her. She has a 5% lead, and again, as they say here, Democratic support has reached its highest point in the MSNBC News national polling since the middle of 2023. So it's been well over a year since we've seen a poll for NBC that's as good for Democrats. And this is really interesting because the polls have moved towards Kamala Harris, and the question of who's going to win the popular vote to me now isn't really a debate anymore. It was when Biden was on the ticket, and I think you could have still made a case in the early days of the Harris campaign. But we know now that Harris is very likely to win the popular vote. The last poll that had Trump ahead nationally was a very good poll, by the way. New York Times Siena, from the beginning of the month, they had Trump up by 1, but since then, Trump has trailed in every poll. YouGov, RMG, FAU, Harris, which, by the way, HarrisX is one of the pollsters that's had Trump doing the best for the past 2 years. And when they push undecided voters, they have him down by 4. Fox News has Trump down. And so we have a good number of reputable pollsters that have come out and said Kamala Harris leads Donald Trump. And this is huge news for Harris because, again, we know that the polls are going to be wrong in some way, but we don't know what direction they're going to swing in. Obviously, Donald Trump, the past 2 elections, has benefited from a polling miss, but in 2022, it was Democrats who benefited hugely from a polling miss. So the good news for Democrats is that the good nonpartisan polls do have them ahead. And again, NBC had, Harris up by 5, right? And that's a huge shift even from July where Biden was down 2. So we saw a 7-point swing in just the past 2.5 months. So obviously at this point in time, we know that Kamala Harris has gained significant support as compared to Joe Biden. And so what's interesting now at this point is we have to think about how this translates to the Electoral College, because in 2020, Biden won the popular vote by 4.5, but he only won the Electoral College, by 0.6% across 3 states. If Biden had done maybe 0.7% worse nationally, he would have lost the election if you gave him 0.% worse in every single state. So if we assume that the Electoral College looks the same as 2020, a 2.9% popular vote victory for Harris, as the average suggests, would still be a very narrow loss for her. The good news is that, first of all, the more recent poll, like the MSNBC poll, has her up by 5. But more importantly, just, not to talk about one poll, right? Like, the Electoral College bias that has helped Republicans in recent years is likely to be a bit smaller this year. That's because in the polls and even in the 2022 midterms, we saw this. Democrats did worse in New York and California and in Florida, like the 3 big states, but they did better where it mattered. They did better in Arizona. They did better in Georgia. They did better in Wisconsin, better in Michigan, better in Pennsylvania. And obviously, Democrats can lose 3-4% support in California, and it wouldn't matter because they'd still win the state. But they can't lose even 2% in Pennsylvania. They can't lose even 3% in Michigan. They can't even probably lose 1% in Georgia. And so, obviously, because the Electoral College, because of the system, it matters where you get the votes from. So let's say Harris does do worse in New York and Florida and California, which she, I think, will do. I think that compared to Biden 2020, she'll underperform in all 3 of those states. It doesn't matter if she does well or equally as well as Biden in 2020 in the core 7 swing states. So keep that in mind as we look at the polls. The polling error won't be the same, and the Electoral College bias will not be the same. Of course, I'm not saying that a 2.9% victory for Harris means she's guaranteed to win, but I do think if you drive my feet to the fire right now, I would say that the break-even point for Harris or Trump, probably like a 2.5, 2.6 margin for Harris. So if you believe the polling average, I think right now Kamala Harris in the Electoral College is very narrowly ahead. Because again, we've seen in the polls that the swing states are voting much more in line with the national popular vote than they were in 2020. Because even in 2020, the better polls had Biden winning Pennsylvania by maybe 3, 4, or 5, and they had him up nationally by 8 or 9 points. This year, good polls have Harris up by anywhere between maybe 2 and 4, 2 and 5, and then they'll have her winning swing states by between 1 and 5. So they're much more in line. They're much more correlated. And that is a very good sign for the Democrats because they don't need to win the popular vote by as much as Biden would have needed to win it by in 2020. So that's what I have for you today. Let me know what you want to see next. I'll start doing some more in-depth analysis because we're getting very close to the election. We're well into the month. It's gonna be October in a week, so we're in crunch time. And in the spirit of that, I'm gonna ask you to subscribe because I'll be posting. I'll be trying to post daily, but at least 5 times a week between now and election day, giving you updates. Obviously, I have a good track record. If you want, you can read the description, check out my other predictions from the past. I'm here to keep you informed and tell you what's going to happen in November. So subscribe, like the video, and I'll see you all next time.